and just making these small incremental changes in how you react and work and live your life for the better. And just little by little, just add on the blocks, right? And you'll eventually get to a tower.
Curiosity isn't just about gathering information. It's a leader's superpower for turning chaos into innovation. Hi there, I'm Ryan Munsey, and I'm so glad that you're here with me today for this episode of the Move the Chains podcast. Look, as an entrepreneur, best-selling author, high-performance coach, and keynote speaker, I help executives, athletes, and leaders around the world take the next steps towards success. And every week on this show, we'll bring you the best tools, tips, and tricks to achieve those big dreams, and also interview some of the world's most successful people so we can learn how they manage to push through and achieve their dreams as well. Today, we are joined by Jon Bassford. Jon is a best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and the founder of Lateral Solutions. His reputation as the operations guy is well-earned, but the magic behind his success is his curiosity. So today, Jon reveals why curiosity is the greatest accelerator for your personal and organizational growth. A couple of quick teasers on some of the things that you're going to hear today. The most common mistake that leaders make when driving change and how curiosity solves it. A simple, repeatable framework that you can use for diagnosing and solving business problems. How to embed curiosity into operations, culture, and personal leadership. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. That was a mouthful.
Yeah. Well, we got to give people a reason to be excited and stick around.
Absolutely.
So I guess tell me a little bit about your background. I mean, from law to operations to now an entrepreneur, how did curiosity become your, let's call it, core operating principle?
Yeah. So, I think it's been a kind of a guiding principle my entire life without really knowing about it. Right. It's just something that's very, very innate in me. Always taking on opportunities as a kid, high school, college, et cetera. Being that kid who always liked to hang around with adults at family reunions and learn about people's lives and backgrounds and travels, and just kind of that inquisitive kid. You fast forward to my career, and it's what really allowed me to kind of just question the status quo. Organizations become creatures of habits because people are creatures of habits, right? And we fall into the same mundane routines over and over again. And really the secret to break free from that is being able to challenge those status quos, and that's done through curiosity. But my career and my life had this curiosity angle to it and backdrop, but I didn't really, understand that curiosity was going on. So a couple of years ago, I actually was networking between opportunities, and someone introduced me to a colleague of theirs who is an academic who helps people to define their superpower. And after interviews and forums and intake, that sort of stuff, what came back was curiosity. And I really began to slowly dive into that and dissect how it's been a guiding principle throughout my life and career.
So what has that looked like for you, that process of diving into it and I guess building repeatable processes for others since you've learned how powerful it has been for you?
Yeah. So for me, again, it kind of happened very, very innately. And, one story I always talk about is in my very first job, I was traveling around the country, visiting these law schools to train leaders in the law schools. And I was being told what to tell these individuals, but I couldn't find it written down anywhere. Like there was no laundry list of saying, this is your job as a chapter officer. This is what you're supposed to be doing. I'm telling them this, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So I went back armed with my curiosity, asked, my boss, where is this located? It turns out it was buried in the back of a conference manual that not everyone goes to, not everyone sees, not everyone takes home with them. Right. So just that nature of saying, hey, I'm being told something, but I want the background. I want to be able to show them, what that is. So for me, it just was a very, very innate process. But as I've grown in my career in operations, I've learned that innateness is not there in everyone. And because habits, fear, comfort are nature, natural elements of human nature, our organizations take that on. And so to get away from that, you have to create these mechanisms in your organization to start challenging and questioning what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it that way. And so, it all starts with just a lot of times just asking simple questions. Why are we doing something? What's the purpose of this? Why are we doing it this way? Mapping things out, simple things like your accounts payable system. I can tell about an organization and a leader so much by seeing how the leader, the CEO, interacts with their accounting systems and in the processes and what happens in them, and just mapping out those processes to see who touches what, when, where, and why, and what the steps are, and then kind of break down where the inefficiencies are, where the roadblocks are, where are things that we can use technology to streamline the process and have less human involvement from an error standpoint as well as an automation standpoint.
Can you give us an example of, or maybe a story about exactly that, where you saw how a leader was interacting, whether it's payroll or some other department, and then what you're able to learn from that, and how you plan a course of action going forward to improve?
Sure. Yeah. So, there's a great example from a startup I was working with recently around the accounting systems. And this is a US based entity, but had a European subsidiary. So they had 3 bank accounts, 2 accountants, a bookkeeper, 3 sets of books. Just everything was all over the place, right? So I came in a very a fractional role to kind of help them during their founding COO left abruptly. I think he got burned out by some of the things I was seeing, and I stepped in there. I'm like, this is a mess. Everyone saw everything. There were every invoice that came in or every bill that came in, 8 people saw it. There were no systems as to whether or not it went to the Greek entity, no systems whether to the U.S. entity, which, he picked and chose which bank account paid the bills based upon exchange rates at the time, and everyone saw everything. Everything was ad hoc. There was no systems or structures, and, people were spending, 5-10 hours a week on accounts payable when, this should be a 3-hour a month job for one person. But because everyone was seeing it back and forth, no system. So I was like, look, man, you got to change this, right? Like first and foremost, when something comes in, there has to be a defined system of whether the US or the European subsidiary is handling this. Like, that's first and foremost. Let's make that decision. And what I could see was his, the leadership component comes into the operations, because he wanted to control it. He wanted to see every step. He didn't trust that people are doing the right thing, and so I had to kind of lead him into this little by little, and really break it down. And so once I was able to let him see, hey, look, yes, you're going to spend a little bit more money on wire transfer fees. Yes, we're gonna adopt a software system that's low cost, but what you're going to get back is 5 to 10 hours of your week. This is a guy who already worked 20 hours a week, right? Sleeping 4 hours. And so I really had to work on him to see, he can let go. He can trust the process. If the reason why mistakes were happening, bills weren't being paid, there were duplicate payments, is because they didn't have a process, right? Things were going everywhere, which meant they were going nowhere. So I had to first work on him to let him see the benefits of this. And then it's like, look, once I got him bought in, it was a very simple process of adopting these procedures, separating out, everything that exists, in this realm goes over here. Everything that exists in this realm goes over there. And you start at the contracting phase, right? He's like, how are people going to know? You put it in the contract. Every contract I do, it tells people where to send their bill, where to send their invoice, right? Lay this all out, make it, design it to a T. If you have to handle a few ad hoc processes here and there, do it. But when you have a process you can trust, things get done better, things get done quicker, and less involvement and headaches from everybody else involved.
So I hear a lot of efficiency in there, optimization. Is that something that, like curiosity, has been innate for you, or is that something that's learned as well?
Yeah, I'd say it's fairly innate. I define operational excellence as an organization's ability to achieve its intended results as efficiently and effectively as possible. And so that's always my goal when I'm working with an organization, again, whether beginning my career as a W-2 or now as a consultant, is how do we make sure, first of all, let's make sure we understand what those intended results are. And then how do we maximize those results and how do we get there as quickly as possible? And sometimes, the answer isn't the quickest way to get the best results. So you got to really kind of take a look at what that result is and what is the best way to get there.
I love it. So I want to circle back just for a second. And you threw out that phrasing of like, you're talking about challenging the status quo and in an organizational environment, asking, why are we doing it this way? I think if the person asking that question is somebody who has been brought in as a consultant or an optimization specialist or whatever, that question is very well received. If that question is asked by an everyday W-2 or colleague, it can be seen as a challenge, as a threat. So as we kind of shift this conversation into creating cultures where curiosity is not only accepted, but promoted and encouraged, how do we, I guess it's a two-part question. It's like long-term, how do you create that culture? And then in the short term, how can you begin to ask those questions in a way that doesn't immediately make colleagues defensive?
Sure. So I want to start with a story that I think we've all have faced sometime in our career, right? Where the C-suite, the boss, the owner, CEO discovers a problem, something in the organization that's been going on for weeks, months, maybe even years. They finally discover that this is happening and realizing how horrible of a system process it is. And they go to the most junior person who's involved in that task. And they say, hey, I just realized this. This is how we've been doing this. This is all wrong. And what does the person say? I know. And what does the boss do every single time? They get mad at that person, right? They say, why didn't you speak up sooner? Why didn't you tell someone? Why didn't you change this? Well, part of my job in getting people to make these change and change these cultures is getting that CEO to realize they're the problem, right? If you're not creating this environment where people can speak up, speak out, say things, then you're not going to have that opportunity to learn from your staff. A CEO should not know the ins and outs of everything happening in his organization. He should not know the administrative process of accounts payable and accounts receivable, right? They shouldn't know some of this stuff. And so you're not the best person to discover when something is being inefficient or ineffective in your company. So you have to rely on your staff. One of my phrases is, unless you're the lead singer of a one person band, you got to bring the team along with you. And so you got to create that culture, as you're talking about, where the people feel safe to do that. And the answer to that is creating an environment around psychological safety. And this is actually something that came out from a Google study called Project Aristotle. They were trying to determine what made a team successful within Google. And they came out with this term, psychological safety, where it creates an atmosphere where people feel safe to bring ideas, point out problems, and engage with one another in a more meaningful way. And that is what defined or determined how successful an organization was or a team was. And so how do we translate that into tactically with a CEO and his staff and the culture is, first and foremost, get to know your team. Right. And I don't mean, talking to them at the company happy hour or the pizza party or the water cooler. But, instead of having meetings where you're talking to your staff, your direct reports, your junior people about how they're doing in their job, have a conversation about what they're seeing in the organization. In those one-on-one conversations, start building it there so that they see that their voice wants to be heard, is being heard. And having those one-on-one conversations, and then you bring it to the broader context of the organization when there's staff meetings, when there's team meetings, when there's project meetings. When you bring up to your team, say, hey, I want to know your thoughts. You've already had these one-on-one dialogues with them where they can see that you want to know their thoughts and care about them. And one of the biggest things a leader can do is speak last. Again, we've all sat in the rooms where the CEO, the owner, the project manager says, hey, this just happened, this event happened, this project got launched. I want to hear from you guys, what you thought about this, but first let me tell you my thoughts. And they go through all the things that went wrong or right, blah, blah. And what happens is that leader has just moved that entire conversation in their direction. If you don't have this environment already built in, then people are going to water down their responses. They're not going to overtly disagree with the CEO. And so when you learn to speak last and let your team speak up, you're going to have much more less polished and varnished opinions that they're going to side with them and get those true and honest views of what happened.
I love that. Let's continue with examples like that. What are some other practical ways that folks can embed, whether it's curiosity, challenging the status quo, leveraging some of the things that we're talking about by building it into whether it's a hiring process, meetings, goal setting, whatever it looks like?
Yeah. So, I've been managing people since the very beginning of my career, and early on in that process, one thing I started doing very early on is dropping your traditional review process of you got your sheet, rank the person from 1 to 10 in all these areas. For one, if you're waiting to once a year to review that type of stuff and acknowledge that with your staff, you're waiting too long. I'm a big believer that you start incorporating those conversations about, how to, in the reviews, make it much more about how do we make your job better? What do you see going on? Make that about them, what they're seeing, how they can help. Even ask that kind of that 360 view of like, what can I do to make your job better? What am I doing that's holding you back or holding this organization back? And really have that deep dialogue. So you involve that in your review process. Hiring is another great thing. I'm a big believer, especially with operations people. When I'm hiring someone, I am looking for people who can think outside the box and problem solve. And I'm asking questions directly to that. I'm asking them, if you find something wrong, how do you handle that? Give me an example. You found something wrong in your last job and how you approach that with the leadership. Really bring up those type of questions. Do they have the confidence and the ability to be able to do that? And again, just kind of creating that culture and just building it. We all know what typically happens in an organization when there's, we'll just go with the staff meeting example, and the leader, the CEO, asks the new person what they think about something. Everyone rolls their eyes like, what the hell do they know? They've been here for 2 weeks. Why is he calling on them? That's the first person you should be talking to. Mm-hmm. They're the person coming to this organization before the habits kick in, before the traditions, before any negative culture that exists in that organization. They're coming in with a fresh set of eyes. You should be meeting with your new people. The manager should be with their new people once a week for the first 3 to 6 months, and truly tapping into their unbiased opinion and views of what they're seeing. When you start just kind of doing these little things here and there, again, nothing we're talking about costs money. It's not a significant amount of time. It's a little bit of investment of your time, but it's really just about creating this environment where you start showing people that they can speak up, speak out, and bring ideas, point out problems, and create better solutions together.
So as you're talking through that, I can only imagine if I were to say that to some leaders that I know, I might hear something along the lines of, well, that sounds great, but I don't have time to meet with these new hires once a week for the first 3 to 6 months. I'm sure you've gotten that too. What's your what's your response to that kind of an objection?
Yeah, I mean, then spend your time doing interviews for new staff. Spend your time, dealing with HR and firing people. Deal with people leaving constantly. You're going to spend your time somewhere, right? There's only so much time to go around, and if you can invest in these little areas, you are going to get it back tenfold. You're not only going to get more done. You're going to get things done better, more efficiently. You're going to have a happier, healthier staff. And I know it kind of is seen as kind of being new agey to want your staff to want to work at your place, to care about showing up every day and enjoy their job. One of the complaints we often hear about the younger generation is they only want to do what they want to do and not what they don't want to do, which is majority of their job. That's actually things that are talked about in Napoleon Hill's books, right? Like, if you think about it, would you rather have an employee who's doing 90% of what they hate and 10% what they like to get a paycheck, or 90% of what they love and 10% they're tolerate to get that paycheck? Which one is going to get more done, be more engaged, solve more problems, do a better job? It's going to be the latter one, right? So the bonuses for you as a manager, as a leader, to the organization as a whole, and to your staff, it's uncomparable to anything else that you can do by building this type of culture.
Yeah, that's well said. I'm just curious. So far, we've been talking a lot about how this curiosity pertains to organizational structures. If we were to look at this through the lens of personal development, personal growth, how do you see curiosity being a seed there, the same way that it can be for organizational development?
Yeah, I mean, it applies the same. The way I define curiosity in my own in the context of both personal and organizational development is the intentional act of looking beyond your current situation's limitations. Again, as human beings, we are creatures of habit, fear, comfort, and we get bogged down in that. I've been on, I hate using this term, but a spiritual journey the last 5-6 years of mindfulness, consciousness, of meditating, that sort of stuff, and that all sparked because of one conversation I had. I had a conversation with someone, and they're like, "Jon, you need to read this book." And I read the book, and it just opened the floodgates. And I have always been a very successful, driven individual, but I've also been plagued by self-doubt and limitations and old programming that still exists from childhood and your developmental years, that sort of stuff. And really just my curiosity of constantly looking at what can I do to improve my life, improve my mind, improve my belief systems goes a long way. The example I like to give, obviously, we all know the story of the 4-minute mile, right? Throughout recorded history, no one is able to break the 4-minute mile. And then Bannister finally did, I think that's his name, right? Finally did. And then that got broken a month and a half later, right? Because people finally realized, hey, we can do it. So it was the curiosity piece, right? Like people were just resigned to the fact that no one can run faster than a 4-minute mile. But once people realized they could, it allowed them to challenge their limitations, it challenged their assumptions and the status quo of even how they saw their lives and what they could achieve, and everything opened up because of that.
Do you remember what the book was? You said somebody recommended a book to you.
Yeah, Soul Without Shame.
Soul Without Shame. I don't know that.
And what that book is about is really kind of goes deep into the psychology, biology, evolution of the superego, why it exists, why it existed from a human nature standpoint, but why it no longer serves us today. So again, even though the fear, comfort, habits, stuff I always talk about are natural and they helped us survive, they're the absolute enemy of innovation, growth, and change, which is what we got to create those mechanisms to question and challenge.
Well, that author owes you a steak because you just sold me on it. I'm going to go. I got to cue that one up on Audible. You said, you made the comment, and I kind of I chuckled to myself because I think I feel the same way. But you said you don't like the phrase spiritual journey, and I get it. Maybe there's not a better phrase, but isn't it funny how there are so many negative connotations? I believe. I could be wrong, but I believe that's why you don't like the phrase, that there are so many negative connotations around something that is so powerful and so beneficial for so many people.
Yeah. And part of that's my own baggage, right? I was someone who grew up in the Midwest in a Southern Baptist home, went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. And so spirituality in that context means something very different than what I mean today. And so it's kind of really my own issues with, not issues, but just, bifurcating the religious side of spiritualism versus, what I'm meaning in the mindfulness, consciousness,
Yeah.
universal energy, again, whatever you want to call it, relation to that stuff.
Got it. So a couple other things I wanted to ask you about in regards to what you teach specifically. You have a process, the methodical audit process. Can you explain to our listeners how that process can help surface the right questions? And again, I'll look at this through multiple lenses in your personal life, but also in business and in an organizational setting.
Yeah, I mean, as I've dove deeper into operations and process, again, when I first started my career, it's all about like, let's analyze what we're doing, how we're doing it. As I've stepped more into looking holistically at operations, it has to combine that leadership, coaching, mindset aspect, the culture aspect, in order to actually make that operational piece work. So when our audit process, we actually start out with looking at the decision-making framework. It's how the leadership of the organization views the organization. And kind of put it in simple terms, it's looking at like those traditional terms of, is your organization traditional or innovative, right? Kind of looking at that, because that how each decision maker in your organization views the organization affects how they make decisions and how they interact with one another. So we're looking at that aspect. We're looking at the culture of the organization. We're looking at, does your staff have the capability of change? And if there are certain people who don't, how we work with them one-on-one to give them that additional guidance through change. And so that's kind of the precursor to it, just examining where those exist currently in the organization. And then we go deeper into the actual operations. We're like our main operational strength and maturity audit covers 47 different areas, from your governance and legal practices to your sales and marketing. So we're looking at the entire organization and seeing where you exist. And then we're also diving into the efficiency of your internal operations. So we're really covering every aspect here. And one thing that's different about what we do from traditional strategic planning processes is this isn't aspirational. We're doing a deep dive diagnostics of where you are now. And I think that's where strategy plans often fail, is because it's the same people sitting around the same table talking about where they want to be in 5 years without ever doing that analysis of where are we now? Where are the gaps and holes that continually hold us back from trying to getting to where we want to be? And so if you do that analysis first, find those gaps and holes, and we present, a 12-month growth roadmap that says, like, these are your top 5 areas, your top 10 areas, depending how big the issues are. These are the top things that you need to tackle to really take your business or your organization to the next level.
I love it. You mentioned if there are folks who are resistant to change, or maybe not even resistant, but want to and yet struggle. When you go into that kind of one-on-one work to help guide them through the change, what are some of the coaching cues or strategies, tactics that help those individuals become more comfortable with change or better navigate it, deal with it?
Yeah, I think the main thing is really tapping into their pain points, right? Because most founder CEOs, a lot of it's the same, right? I'm working 20 hours a day. The organization is not moving forward. I'm pulling my hair out. I'm getting burned out. Those are the type of things that happen. Those cues that I see that show me that, for one, they clearly don't have processes that they can trust. If the CEO can't step away for a day, for a week, for a month, even 2 months without things breaking down, they don't have a process. They have constant quarterback, constantly putting out fires instead of acting and operating strategically and tactically. So first recognizing that, where are those problems? What are the main pain points that the leader themselves is seeing? And then I also have to be listening to, okay, what is their main value? For example, the one startup founder I was talking about earlier, he kept going back to wire transfer fees. Like that if we made the changes I wanted to make, I'm like, you are saving $30,000 to $50,000 per employee by employing Greek people versus US. Fuck the $20 wire fee. Who cares? You're saving 30 grand and you're worried about, $100, $240 to pay that person. Like who cares about the wire transfer? So like speak in their terms of language of okay, you're worried about this one little piece. You're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. Let's just step back. Let's look at all the money we're saving by making these changes. So I really have to speak to the values that they have and what they're focused on, which is often time or money, are the two big ones, and really lean into that and show them how these changes, by analyzing these systems and creating these changes, is actually better off for those things that they value.
Yeah, as you were talking, you made the comment about, if a leader can't step away for any length of time, that you don't have processes. And I was really fortunate early in my business career. This is probably back in 2012 when I was first starting my gym. I was really lucky to be a part of a group that had some really smart guys in it. And one of the elder statesmen of the group, if you want to call him that, more experienced owners, was a guy named Zach Evanesh. And he was like one of the original warehouse gym guys. And he made the comment to the rest of us. He's like, look, guys, if you can't step away and your business, or if you go on vacation or something for a week and your business can't make money, you don't have a business. You have a hobby that makes money, and you have to continue to show up in order for it to do that. And so I couldn't help but hear him yelling that at us as you were talking. So,
yeah, I mean, you're a babysitter, right? If your business can't function without you, then you're a babysitter. And another thing that I often sometimes have to say to CEOs, owners, to get their attention is like, you're a bookkeeper. Like, you're an overpaid bookkeeper. Like, what do you mean? Like, you're reviewing and approving invoices, you're paying invoices. Like, you are functioning. You're also the owner and CEO, but you're also a bookkeeper. Again, you have to start tapping into why are they here? Why do they have this business? What do they want out of this? And it's not to be a bookkeeper. It's not to be a babysitter. It's to have a functioning business that's profitable and scalable. And the only way to do that is for the leaders to let go a little bit, create a team that can work and thrive together, and build it all around processes that make it streamlined, efficient, effective. And at the same time, use that culture to tap into ways to constantly improve it. Agile development is something that came up in the software world once cloud storage existed, and they could make changes while a website was still active, right? They didn't have to take a website down. Back in high school, in the 90s, if a website was being updated, it entirely came down, nothing was there, and they upload a new one, right? Well, now they don't do that. They make every change real time. And that's how you have to look at your operations as well, is how do we constantly make tweaks and changes without taking down the website? And that's the way you can do that is through systems, processes, and the culture and leadership to make it all happen.
Yeah. It's amazing how much things have changed in the last 20 years, isn't it? Yeah, how quickly we forget that, in the 90s, websites were down. I remember seeing you'd visit a site and it was like, this is under construction or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Had the little yellow bars. Yeah.
Yeah. The emoji now. So I think in terms of development, again, and I keep stressing this because I think maybe a portion of our podcast listeners are business owners and business leaders, but all of our podcast listeners are interested in personal development and growth. And so I'm trying to frame this through multiple lenses. And so if somebody's not a business owner, how can they apply the things that we're talking about? Because I think it really is important in all of these areas, in business and in your personal life. So blind spots is what I want to ask you about, because I think this is so important, personally and professionally, to be able to identify these. How would you, I guess in your opinion, what role does curiosity play in identifying blind spots? How can it help us identify them faster or more effectively?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's similar to, the operational stuff we're talking about where, curiosity was very innate for me. Similarly, like self-reflection and self-awareness has been something that's been fairly innate for me. So again, if someone's very natural in how they see themselves and in self-critique, it's less of a problem. It's the issue comes is that's not natural for me. I don't naturally go to a place where I'm self-critical, self-assess, and self-aware in situations. And so the first thing that you got to be able to do, just like the CEO who has to listen, you have to listen. Keep your ears open, right? When you're talking to your spouse, you're talking to your friend, you're talking to coworkers, talking to your boss, your direct reports, is pick up on the little things that they are saying about your actions and how it's affecting them. And start diving in a little bit. If someone says, look, I did this, you said this, so I did this. That's always a big cue. Is because you did this, I did this. Someone is directly contributing their actions to something about you and how you operated as an individual. And so just learn to lean into that. Pay attention to those type of cues and ask questions like, well, what about what I did or what I said that prompt you to do that? And start having those questions. And I when talking about curiosity, especially from a personal development standpoint, I'm a big fan of the quote from the great Taoist philosopher Ted Lasso: "Be curious, not judgmental." So when you're asking these questions, you're being inquisitive. You can't be defensive, right? You got to be doing this from a place of I'm wanting to learn, I'm wanting to grow, not how dare you view me this way. And so you really got to come into it with a humble mind and humble heart to really kind of let people open up to you as well and be that honest sounding board of how they're seeing you and how you act.
So, a couple points here. Listeners know this, but Jon, you may not. Tao Te Ching is my all-time favorite book. I have not heard Ted Lasso referred to as a Taoist, and I'm like stress testing that in my head. I'm like, you know what? That's a pretty good description of him. But my next question was actually going to be along the lines of disconfirming information, feedback, getting better at receiving it, because I think you're well aware, so many people will tell you that they want feedback, and even know that it's important for growth. Yet when it's given, it is not always given gift wrapped as, doesn't have a label feedback. I think you did a great job. You've given a couple examples already of how if you're looking for it, it's actually more readily available than most people understand or believe that it is. But I wanted to kind of get into a little bit of how people can get better at receiving it. You started on it. You gave some great examples there. Is there anything else that someone could do to be better at receiving feedback and get more comfortable with disconfirming information?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think sometimes it just comes down to just tell yourself that, right? Literally tell yourself, you meditate, you pray, you have moments of silence, whatever you do to kind of center yourself and get your mind right when you're facing challenges, whatever. Remind yourself, I'm open to feedback. I want to hear, I want to learn, I want to grow. You remind yourself of that, on a daily basis. While you're brushing your teeth, just tell yourself, like, today, I'm open to feedback. Whatever you want to, envision for that day, we talk about manifest, whatever you want to call it, but, just get your mind right about who you want to be that day and what you're going to do and make that a part of it. And also, I think it's important to say that it's okay if you don't initially accept something always positively, right? Like it is human nature for something to offend you if you're not going into it the right headspace. So, don't be afraid to receive some negative feedback. And if you feel yourself having a negative defensive response, be like, that's great that you said that. I need to take a little bit of time. I want to process what you just said. Do you mind if I come back and we talk about this some more later? Don't go into that discussion if you're heated. You're at an 8, 9, or 10 for combat, hostility, whatever you want to call that. And take the time. It's okay to walk away, compose yourself, get your mind right, and then go back into it again with telling yourself they have some good insights. I want to hear them out. I want to hear what they have to say, and I'm going to go into it learning from them for me to be a better person. And you're gonna have such a lower hostility level going into that.
John, that is an amazing answer. I'm going to give you a little bit of pushback though.
Okay.
For someone to respond that way requires a fairly significant amount of self-awareness.
Yeah.
I think our listeners might be able to do that, but the average person in the workplace. So I guess if that's the objective, I'm trying to remember your language earlier, the intended result, right? So how would we then work back and help an individual improve their self-awareness to be able to even have that check-in ability and say, oh man, I'm at an 8, 9, 10 on the combative scale right now, or I'm stressed today, before they bite someone's head off. Because I think in a lot of instances, there's the reaction, and then later they're like, oh shit, and then you have to apologize and blah, 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 which is okay. Like that happens. This is a practice, right? It's learning a new behavior pattern. So just if somebody isn't already there on the self-awareness spectrum, how do we do that?
Yeah, I think you kind of answered already, right? Like if you have that blow up moment, go back and apologize and have the conversation again. I think if you're able to do that, like if that's your starting point of when someone comes at me with something negative about me, I'm going to immediately become defensive and I'm going to, jump back and attack back. Like if that's hard for you to stop, at least be able to go back and say, look, I got defensive. Even going back and having those words, those conversations with individuals, it's going to start slowly reframing your mind, reprogramming your mind to like, I don't have to be defensive. I think you're going to get that positive reinforcement from those conversations, going back and apologizing, seeing the positivity and good intentions that person have. And when you start getting those reward feedbacks from the other person and you are accepting that as a positive reward for yourself, that's slowly going to allow you to start recognizing when you're in those conversations real time and be able to stop that. But it's going to take time. Like again, I'm a very successful, person and confident in what I do. There's times when I just I'm in a lull and I feel like I'm a failure. And so, there's times that like your old thinking, your old programming is going to step in. It's hard to get rid of that stuff. You have to do the work to do it, but just taking those little steps, just realize that I think for me, a lot of times we always see things as winner and loser, good and bad, winner and failure, all those type of things. It just realize that we're all just human. We all make mistakes. We're all on the same journey. We're all working towards things. And just making these small incremental changes in how you react and work and live your life for the better, and just little by little, just add on the blocks, right? And you'll eventually get to a tower.
As you're talking through that, I think our listeners have heard me say this a few times, but I'll say it again in case this is the first time somebody's listening to an episode. But you're talking about patterns. Right? Behavioral tendencies, habits, these are patterns. And what a lot of folks don't understand is that patterns are neurological wiring. They're processes of neurological wiring, right? And so, as you just so well explained, when we have a misstep with a behavioral pattern, we're a lot less forgiving of ourselves than if we have a misstep with a movement pattern that is also neurological wiring. And so, again, I'm sorry if people have heard me say this before, but the phrase muscle memory is nails on the chalkboard to me, because muscles do not have the capacity for memory. It's neurological wiring. So riding a bike, a golf swing, a tennis serve, throwing a baseball or swinging a baseball bat, these are neurological processes. And so the way that you do it and the repetitive effort of doing it greases a groove, and you kind of wear a path, just like a path in the woods. And so where I'm going with this is, if you're a golfer and you put a bad swing on the ball and you block it out of bounds, right? You don't say, well, you might say I suck at golf, but I put a bad swing on it. That's not the swing that I was going for. That's not how I practice my swing. That's not the way I want to swing. So when we make those missteps on physical movement patterns, we're a lot more forgiving of ourselves than we are with behavioral tendencies. And so I always like to remind people of that and encourage people to have a little bit more grace with themselves and more forgiveness especially when you're trying to change a behavior pattern. Because again, same way with changing a golf swing, you need to accumulate more reps in the new way than you have in the old way for the new way to kind of become the way, right? And so I think that's really important for everybody to understand.
Yeah, I think again the habit thing being a natural concept is important to point out, because if you read Charles Duhigg's Power of Habits, he really talks about how if we didn't form habits, we'd be paralyzed by thought. We'd have to think about, to turn a doorknob, I have to lift my shoulder, raise my arm, extend, turn. Like I'm simplifying this down, right? But like it's a lot more muscles, tendons, everything happening all at once to make that happen. If we had to think about that, it would take us 2 days to open a door. But habits allow us to do that. So habits are natural. We form them over time. They help us get through the day more efficiently, effectively. But again, like you said, if we, and I'll throw a stat from Joe Dispenza, which is I think it's 85 or 90% of all our thoughts, actions, and emotions by the time we are 35 are completely programmed. So that means we're going through 85% of our day without thinking about it. And if you think about it, you probably get out of the bed the exact same way, brush your teeth the exact same hand, do so many things without even thinking about it from habit, which again helps from a very efficiency standpoint. But if we want to make some changes in our lives, we got to make these small incremental changes. Like you said, practice it, like be intentional. I want to change this today. Forgive yourself when you don't do it the next day, or you have a relapse in something, but have the intention going into it. I'm going to make this change. And little by little, as you stay committed to that change, that's when it can happen.
Yeah. All right, John, I want to shift gears a little bit. We're going to go rapid fire. So you can go one word answer, you can go one sentence answer, however, but the idea is, we're going to bust through a few of these pretty quickly. Starting off with the most common mistake leaders make when driving change.
Not having the empathy to understand change is hard.
That's a great answer. Give me one powerful question every leader should ask this week.
What can I do to make your job easier?
You already gave us one great book, Soul Without Shame. What's another book or resource that changed how you think about curiosity?
The Surrender Project by Michael Singer was a very interesting one, because it also it's his ability to take on new opportunities, but also the aspect of letting go of control of that and just accepting things as they came to him. It's a really interesting book of both, right? How he had the curiosity to like take it on, but also was just willing to accept what the universe delivered to him to even attempt to do it.
Okay. I'll have to check that one out. You've mentioned letting go a couple of times. I know that's a really important thing, both personally and for a lot of the folks that I've worked with over the years. There's a book called Letting Go by David Hawkins. Have you read that?
Yep, I have.
That's a great book.
Yeah, I mean, for me, really kind of learning, about again the superego and control is an illusion, right? And we think we're controlling things. We work to control things, but in the end, we're just oftentimes just making it worse. And we got to learn to let go. And all you can do is do the work towards those intended results, but you got to let the results happen.
Yep. Okay. One curiosity habit for unlocking hidden wins.
For unlocking hidden wins. Start small, right? Like I think start small. To just like if nothing is going great in your world, the old adage of like you woke up, right? Like start with the little things. It here's kind of along that lines, but sorry, this is a little more than a word or a sentence. But one thing that when I went through kind of a lull in my business and some financial problems a while back, and because just things weren't going the way I wanted them to go, one thing that got me through this period was reminding myself that all of my fears were about the future. And so much of our negative views of ourselves or the past, lies we tell ourselves, or fear about the future. And I had to constantly remind myself, there's nothing in the world that could happen to me right now that I couldn't handle financially. Like barring something stupid, crazy, right? That would never happen. But like, if I had to sell a bunch of stock at a 50% loss to pay a bill, that's what I could do. But there's nothing in the world that could have happened to me financially that I couldn't have handled. And just relying on that and let going of the fear, let going of the anxiety about what was going to happen in 3, 6, 12 months changed a lot for me.
Yeah. I think we've got one more here on the rapid fire. Give me one myth about operations or leadership that you would like to bust instantly.
Got to go back to control. Thinking that you are a great leader by controlling your people, your processes, your team. The one thing I've really discovered in my journey with curiosity and leadership is to look at leadership as the conductor of an orchestra. You allow every person in that band to play their instrument, to be their own expert in that instrument. You are there to keep the timing, keep the rhythm, and keep everyone playing the same song, not dictating how they do it individually.
I love that. I've got a client who listens to this show. He is a battalion chief in a fire department. I hope he's listening to this one because he sent me a text yesterday, and they worked a fire that his town put up on social media, and he sent it to me. And I made a comment about kind of doing their thing. And he said exactly what you just said. He's like, man, when the men do good work, I'm just a conductor standing there, blah, 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 blah. Exactly what you just said. So, Pete, I hope you're listening. Keep conducting. Okay, Jon, where can our listeners get more of your work, your keynotes, everything that you do?
Yeah. So two sites I'll give you. One is my personal brand site, which is jonbassford.com. That's John without an H. Last name is like a bass fish in a Ford car. And then my consulting brand is Lateral Solutions, and the website for that is think-lateral.com.
I have to make a joke since you said the fish and the car, and being from the Midwest, that might be the most Midwestern name possible.
Well, it's more the fact that I've learned that when you say my last name very fast without over enunciating, it sounds like bastard.
I can see that. So we'll put a link to all of that in the show notes. So if you're listening, you can just go down to the description and click on these, and we'll make it easy for you to find everything that you might want to look up for Jon. All right, Jon, final question. Your number one tip for folks that want to build more consistency?
Start small. I mean, like you were talking about earlier, start with little wins. Just build the momentum, and that's the best way to carry through.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Jon, thank you so much for being here today. For everybody listening, thank you for being here. I'm glad that you're listening to the show. Looking forward to bringing you more great guests. This is going to be our final interview for 2025. We've got some great guests lined up for 26. Hope you have great holidays. Happy New Year, and we will catch you in 2026. Make sure you subscribe to the Move the Change podcast wherever you listen so you get notified of new episodes. And if you enjoyed this one, or somebody that you work with needs to learn about curiosity and some of the other things we talked about, share this episode with them.